I am so excited to be chatting with you today. You and I have known each other now for, I don't know, has it been 6 months? Time has gone by pretty quickly.
I think so. I think
Maybe.
it was definitely in the winter when it was cold.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I came to your offices and it was such a warming conversation. I think the things that I've learned from you in our discussions is that you seem to me to be someone that's, and I think this is one of the reasons why you're at Alyce, and I love to hear more about that, but someone that's motivated by connecting with others. Whether it doesn't matter if they're prospects or customers or peers or whatever, like you're motivated by that connection. And the way you're building teams tells me that you're very focused on team empowerment. And it's all done in this very thoughtful way. And I've watched you. I've watched you in your conversations with your team. I've observed when we're chatting, and I appreciate that. It feels like you are writing this playbook for how to build and be a part of companies focused on human connections, and how to build and be a part of teams that are focused on connections. And I know that's like a really meaty thing to throw out there in the very beginning, but it's something for me that's so heartwarming and that I've really, really enjoyed, because it's not just you, like you're teaching that to your teams on how to operate on that level. So um, I love that. And that's one of the reasons why I was, really excited to have you as a part of these conversations.
Definitely.
Um, yeah, yeah. So first, let's tell everyone, where are you located today?
Today, yeah, I'm basically in a town called Lincoln, New Hampshire. We're in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. So you get this amazing backdrop from 1970 of some nice wood paneling, some nice wooden skis, very much ski house vibe. My dog McCleo may pop in every once in a while. Um, we just recently adopted her, and she likes to be vocal during meetings. Definitely.
I saw that you guys volunteer for a rescue organization nearby. Are you
Yes.
still, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, we
Oh
do a
my
lot
goodness.
of we try to we're not necessarily volunteers like fostering dogs, but we try to take our skill set and at least help other, whether it's volunteer organizations or rescue organizations out on the tech side, at least, and volunteer our
Yeah,
hours that way.
yeah,
My
that's
wife and
cool.
I.
Yeah, yeah. It's a team effort. What have you enjoyed about working up in the White Mountains? It feels like this idyllic place to get some
Yeah.
great work done. Is it actually what has been good about it?
It's it's perfect. So our little bit about Lincoln in our town, if there's any skiers out there, Lincoln is home to Loon Mountain, which is a well-trafficked mountain, especially to the folks down in the Boston area. So it gets crowded in the winter, it gets crowded in the summer because we're right on the Mangus Highway,
Mm-hmm.
which is beautiful cycling roads. So fortunate enough, I spend my mornings and I spend my evenings cycling around, whether it's Franconia Notch, Crawford Notch, Bear Notch, Conway. It's all these just picturesque and beautiful areas. So blessed to actually spend a whole heck of a lot of time up here. It's definitely kind of speaks to me in being outdoors, my wife and I at least. So
Mm-hmm.
it's nice to be right on the footsteps of the White Mountains, whether it's hiking, running, cycling, or even helping coach some of the local students in sports too.
Yeah, that's so cool. I know you're an athlete, and that you do a lot of coaching, and I think that's really cool. How do you, Alyce, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about Alyce and what you do there, as the head of customer success. Knowing that you are so focused on bringing your personal passions into your work life, how does that manifest? So we talk about bringing your, as you guys call it, your 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. into your 9 to 5. What does that mean
Yeah,
in practice for you?
yeah, it's actually been an interesting. I would say it's even an interesting career story to me. Kind of just realizing my 5 to 9 really drives my 9 to 5 and kind of where I am today. Um, so some of the stuff that I do on the side that really drives kind of the who I am and what has shaped me and my role today is I do a lot of coaching, and that's actually been a part of my life ever since I was much younger, just being an athlete on the field and helping other people around me on my team coaching. Had no idea what I was doing at the time. But I would say that's one of the core aspects that I've kind of started blending into from my 5 to 9 to my 9 to 5. And that's really accelerated my career, just by starting to recognize that over time. Didn't recognize that honestly until more recently in my career, and I was able to really kind of leverage that, what I do call my 5 to 9 learnings into my 9 to 5. So a lot of the focus of our team, and even the focus when we're working with our customers, is everyone is human here. How do we just make sure, like when we're in these conversations, we're not tone deaf to what they actually appreciate in their real life. So some folks, for example, could be in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. Like they're probably outdoors folks. You probably should talk to
Mm,
them about being outdoors. And that's just going to create a different bond. And honestly, that is kind of what brings out the best in folks too, and some of the best conversations in folks. So that's kind of a lot of the DNA that we're starting to build in our customer success team, but also the motions that we're enabling our customers on too. So it bleeds into our CSM team, but it also bleeds into the enablement that we're doing on our product itself with Alyce.
mm. I've been fascinated observing your team and the greater Alice team by how much that philosophy or that idea of bringing your personal passions into your work life in order to better connect with the person right now on the other side of the screen. Hopefully at some point we'll be able to be face to face again. But a lot of times as companies, when we talk about these things, our mission, our vision, our values, it's hard to keep those as our core drivers as we grow in the way that it's not just lip service. It's actually something that we practice. So as our teams are scaling, it becomes more and more difficult to ensure that this is something that, our prospects and peers and customers, whatever, feel when we have interactions with them. I've been struck by, it doesn't matter if I'm chatting with you or Chaz or Tracy or Allie, or a member of the marketing team, or Greg, your CEO. It really is irrelevant. Everyone seems to be completely bought into this mission and vision, and feels like they're be able to be wholly themselves and fully integrated. And what a powerful thing. How, as you guys have been growing and scaling, what does the experience look like, when you're looking for candidates specifically for your team, let's talk about, and when you're bringing them through the Alice experience so that you are ensuring that this is a unified belief that everyone holds? It's really amazing how you guys have done what you've done thus far.
Yeah, definitely. And it's one of those values that we really take into our recruiting and our interview process, especially on the CSM side. So building a CSM team is always, it's hard,
Mm,
because especially early stage, because you're not really sure what's going to be the right customer success manager fit for your customers. What's that like appropriate behavior you should be kind of creating for each of your customers, because you may not even know exactly what is your ideal fit yet, and you have to kind of learn along the way. So the approach that I took when we started this last year and started building this team from the ground up is really look for a couple of different things in our customer success managers and make sure we're diversifying that as much as possible.
mm,
um, so a couple of the core things: curiosity is one of my always like biggest pillars that I look for in someone, because that is, if they're curious about something, they're going to ask a lot of questions. They're really going to get into the details of what that person or that company is trying to solve for. Another one is planning and kind of like skills to make sure
mm,
they're organized. Like those are your two normal ones. Then the third one that I really introduced when I joined Alyce was, what's something they're passionate about outside of just being a customer success manager, and how does that actually relate to them being a customer success manager? So that actually opened up a lot of different doors and perspectives when we were interviewing. So we have a lot of diverse talent on our team.
mm,
Like you mentioned Allie and Tracy before. Tracy actually worked with me at my last company that I was a part of, and her skill set and her passions are very different than even some of the folks that are on our team right now.
mm,
So what I mean by that, her 5 to 9. I almost said 9 to 5 there.
Old
Her
habits.
5, yeah, exactly. Her 5 to 9 is really focused on, she has pets. She loves cats, loves dogs, really passionate animal person. And she cares a lot about that. And it was just something that we were able to kind of bring out and see, like, hey, like, how does that actually like impact her workings on a day-to-day basis? Then take someone that we hired a little bit later on, Monica, who is extremely passionate and involved in the government aspect of the United
Mm,
States. So she's very passionate about voting and rights and all of that stuff. And actually, she does a lot of campaigning on the side for certain political parties.
mm,
And those are the types of things we really look for. It's like, what is their outside passions that they can bring to our company and give us like different perspectives of view, vantage points.
mm,
So like Monica has been really super delightful in actually scaling up our diversity and inclusion aspect of our company. We also had another, Jen, who's on our support team, had a very similar background to Monica as well. And that was something we saw, like both those folks really meshing well and taking on these side projects in actually improving our employee aspect of Alyce. So it was a different approach than I've done previously, where it's mainly just looking for those first two pillars. This has actually helped us build a much more diverse and cohesive, talented team, where everyone is kind of, they have their own strengths and their own weaknesses. They all come together at the end of the day and really help each other out. And they act more as a team than some of the teams I've actually built in the past, which I'm super thrilled to actually see happen. And just by including that one value has really changed how we've built our customer success management team and also the teams, other teams underneath the customer team.
yeah, that's really powerful. I think we've watched companies and maybe we've even built teams in the past where the expectation was you brought some skills. Hopefully, the skills, obviously, they matched what we needed for the role. And then maybe you did some sort of guardrails where certain people were good in certain skills when others were maybe weak in those skills. So we had some nice matching. And then we lead them through this onboarding process that almost strips them of their individuality and makes them more the company brand persona. And then we put them out in the field. Um, and I've noticed this emergence that's been happening where with a lot of things culturally are coming together, which remind us of the importance of the individual within the collective, and celebrating our differences and our different passions, and knowing that if we have those passions, likely our customers will also have some of those different passions. And then it's fun to acknowledge them, to talk about them, and to use that as an opportunity to share more about ourselves. Um, so I think that's amazing. I think that's a really good tidbit to share with everyone that's listening. That last key question that you ask or look for to get a sense of what are the personal differences that they're bringing to the table. Um, Now, when it comes to building this team and bringing the personalities together, what are some of the things for prospects, people that aren't yet a customer, not yet working with your team? What are some of the ways that you describe what it's like to interact with members of the customer success team as they're going through the Alyce journey?
Yeah, definitely. We really strive to be different, I
Mm.
will say. Um, and for context, a little bit about the types of customers we work with, so I think this might set the stage really well too,
Yeah.
is we're typically working with larger engagements, meaning higher dollar values. So our CSMs typically have small book sizes. So their book of business is roughly, call it in between 15 or 20 accounts on average.
Mm.
So the volume's much lower. So our strategy is really much more high touch as of today. And I think it's good to set that context and that foundation of like what our CSM motion actually is. So what we have them kind of really focus on is like, sorry, I just lost my train of thought right there. I had to edit that out.
No problem. Hey, we have
um,
Slacks going on. We have emails being sent. Like lots going on
I
today. And it's a
I just had
Friday.
like a bunch of notifications pop up. I'm just like, why are these notifications popping up?
Hey, if anyone wants a window into the life of a customer success leader, you know that this is something that happens all
Yeah, I
day
was like, is
long.
there a fire happening over here right
Do
now?
I need to address?
Yeah, just turn my
No, no.
notifications off, new computer, figure that out.
We are masters at multitasking. What else? Of
Yeah,
I think really like having a lot of things spinning on our plate.
yeah,
And I think for any leader in this space, like you know how it is.
yeah, exactly.
But you were talking about the type of customer that you work with, and then how you sort of bring your customers through that process so they understand, here's what it's like to work with us, here are the benefits that we provide.
Yeah, and we in kind of my like big approach and big vision with our customer success team in general is how do we bring our category, which is personal experience, into every single interaction with our company. And
Mm,
that's not easy. So many companies have tried, so many companies try to do this with automation. We're kind of trying to do this in an unscalable way first and then
mm,
scale it out as we go. So where we've seen a lot of success is how close our CSMs are getting with our customers and their initiatives. So not just their product initiatives with Alyce, but their really business initiatives.
mm,
So what does it really mean to buy Alyce from a business sense, not just a product sense? And that's really where we want our CSMs to operate, and we kind of operationalize them a bit more. So we're doing
mm,
a lot more of that, like how can we get our CSMs to be those trusted advisors and be embedded on their teams with the customers itself. So they're in every single decision. An example there is we actually don't have our CSMs handle any of the commercial aspects. That's all handled from our sales and our account management team. So that also removes that layer of you always see kind of this wall built up when the CSM does have a commercial transaction, especially in the higher touch engagement. So we decided to remove that out of our motion and try to scale it out without it.
mm,
So how do we really just focus on like what are those business outcomes and business objectives that our customers bought Alyce for? And a lot of times
mm,
they may not have that out of the gate. So this gets into how do we proactively make sure they do have an objective? Because you may have a customer that, or Alyce does have customers, I should say,
mm,
is where they come in and they buy Alyce as a product, and Alyce is a great product. And you're looking for a quick, easy product outcome, but you didn't necessarily buy a personal experience platform. So what our
mm,
CSMs are tasked with those types of customers is really give them the trail map to get to that personal experience. Whether it's how do you get engaged with someone a little bit higher up to help drive that vision a little bit more, or how
mm,
do you get that person that you're working with to get promoted and really start talking about that story to their boss and to their boss's boss about how Alyce is really impacting them as a business and not just a channel, a marketing channel or a sales channel anymore. Um, those are the types of things our CSMs are super, super focused on a day-to-day
mm,
aspect, which again, a lot of it is more manual, and every single customer kind of goes in different ways.
mhm,
It's not really super, super repeatable just yet, but that's not our goal in the near term. Our goal in the near term is really just figure out what is working and then figure out how do we make it repeatable with the underlying motion of how do we also make it a personal experience. Um,
mm,
and
mm,
that is kind of how we've taken our charter and our approach specifically to our customer success management team. And also
mm,
in the internal side is how do we support the customer success managers more. So we have a solutions team as well, that
mm,
where our customer success managers, they're not technical. They don't need to know the ins and outs of our Salesforce integrations, but they do need a resource that can be the subject matter expert there. So when we do get into these architecting and blueprinting style conversations about attribution data, we want to make sure we provide them the right resource. So the
mm,
CSM can act as the quarterback while the SME expert in, call it Salesforce or Marketo or marketing automation, is
mhm,
kind of your wide receiver or your running back. So everyone's kind of collectively as that team in the CSMs running that
mm.
playbook.
Yeah, it sounds like you have an entire ecosystem around customer success that helps support their efforts. And we talk about their efforts since you have them so focused on customer outcomes. You're supporting them in order to support the customer, which makes a lot of sense. When I think about some teams that are struggling, like for teams out there that are, as we talk about, high touch, or they're having a lot of moments with their customers and they're really in lockstep, chatting with them likely every week, maybe several times a week. In those scenarios, for those teams that are looking to understand the customer outcomes or the goals that they're setting, I've heard a lot of teams talk about this metric as a CPI, or a customer performance indicator. Contrast that to KPI, a key performance indicator, which is likely the company goal. So when you're looking at the customer specific goals, a lot of times I know it's hard to get a clear metric from our customers, especially enterprise. A lot of times they'll talk about these more philosophical, philosophic type goals.
It's Friday.
Friday, guys.
It's Friday. It's month 3 in quarantine.
English is a living language. These, it's harder to get them to say what their goal manifested means from a numbers perspective. When you guys are running into those opportunities where your mission and vision together might be totally simpatico, right? You're aligned, absolutely. But that doesn't mean necessarily that you've nailed a specific metric that you can tie to the fact that you're so aligned in your mission and vision. Does your team encounter this? How are some of the ways that they work around it? We're like, great, we have this big goal, this 50,000 foot view goal, but here's how it manifests from a daily perspective of the tiny little tasks and milestones that need to happen so that we achieve that. I was really long and verbose, but hopefully you understand what I'm
Yeah, it's
getting
good. You could also break this into an internal and external. So working with the customer and then actually building out the customer success org around this too. I can tackle both questions, or both answers rather. How I look at it to be a little more tactical is like with our customers and how we coach our customer success managers. You're 100% right, is you may have a goal, and a common goal with Alyce, since we are in MarTech and we are in sales tech, is we want to have conversion or booked meetings. Like that's a great metric, but how do you actually get there? Like you're not going to get there just by flipping on Alyce. It's a journey. And that's the big thing we want our customer success managers, especially in the initial like strategy calls and the beginning conversations, is to say like, hey, let's take a step back first. Like it's great that that's going to be our KPI, but there's a lot more things on this journey that are going to be our objectives at given points in times. And our first objective, honestly, is to get adoption and to get this thing going. So we need to build that foundation first. And getting booked meetings is not the correct KPI for that. The correct KPI for that could be like, how do we get user adoption in those first 30 days or those first 60 days? And once you get user adoption, that's when you can start maturing into these next milestones and these next metrics that you should be measuring too. A lot of times CSMs will fall into the trap of saying, on our initial kickoff, like, what's your goal? What are you looking to get out of our product? And then they have this one metric and it's just not going to be attainable in the time frame that that customer is looking to attain it in. So when those two things are mismatched, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure out of the gate. So one of the big things that we do tell our CSMs is be very bold and make sure you are dictating that flow, because you know what's best for our solution and how, honestly, 99% of our customers have implemented it and they follow this guideline. So what's that maturity model actually look like with our solution? And where does their goal fit in? Could be a year out from now, it could be a couple years out from now, but making sure we set that expectation. A lot of times it's within our first year, which is a good thing for us, because we do see that time to value relatively fast. But if you're expecting that time to value in the first 30 days, your expectations are offset and you're just not going to have a great experience in general. So we try to get ahead of that as much as possible with what we would call the maturity model in the journey that our customer does go through, and making sure, like, are your KPIs aligned? Is your objective aligned of where you are in the maturity process of Alyce?
Smart that you call that out in the very beginning. You have the discussions that are meant to have in the, maybe it's the kickoff call or it's very soon after the kickoff call, where you talk about, and level set some of the goals. I think in the past, at times, because customer success managers can sometimes, they're high on the EQ scale, high on empathy, we're people pleasers. It can be hard for us to say, that's probably not going to happen. Or even
Yeah.
the word no is really hard to say. So I think, that taking the tactic of, acknowledging that that's a goal, really excited to help them achieve that. And here's probably what you're looking at as far as a timeline. It's going to be outside of a year. It's probably not going to happen inside 30 days. And then incentivizing them with the key milestones that can happen over the next 30, 60, 90 plus, so that they work towards getting there. That seems like now we're working towards the same goal, and acknowledging the fact that it's probably not going to happen ASAP, but it can happen in the future relatively quickly, maybe, if we can follow this playbook.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not always about saying no, it's about guiding them to where that actually happens. I'm a huge believer in guiding when someone gives you a question that you just can't answer, or should be no. Can't
Mm,
be no though, because you don't want to say no to your customer because you are a CSM, you are a people pleaser.
mhm,
Is you can say we could do this or we could do it correctly this way. Is
mm.
always giving that alternative and that option versus just like, no, you can't have that, because it
Yeah,
is always abrasive too sometimes, and that's
yeah.
that's a little like soft skill tactic that we like to kind of train into our CSMs.
Yeah. I like, as you're thinking about this notion of guiding customers, I see the CSM team as like the Yoda, right? The customer is
Yeah.
the hero. They're going to be doing a
Yep.
lot of the work. They have the lightsaber. Well, Yoda has his
Yep.
lightsaber too.
Yeah.
But Yoda is like,
Only
let me
uses
teach
it
you the
when he
way.
has to.
Exactly. And it's amazing when he does.
Yeah. Or actually, maybe Baby Yoda is a better comparison.
Oh my gosh, don't get me started on Baby Yoda. Oh, cutest thing I've ever seen. Yeah, but I think it's that idea of, you are the guide that's taking them through this journey. You
Yep.
mentioned having a trail map. And ultimately it's for them to sort of step through and do, some of the amazing work to get some of the successes they're looking to achieve. Um, and I've experienced some of that with your team as well, going through and implementing Koala, where Chaz and I sort of were that co-guides through that entire process, and I got to observe sort of how you work with your customers, and it
Yeah.
was pretty fun. Well, you made it fun and collaborative, which I loved.
Yeah. That's our goal.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. It's simple. Just make it fun, make it collaborative.
Yeah. Implementing software is never fun.
Uh, yeah, yeah. I get,
We try
and
to
you
make it
can.
as personal as possible.
There you go. Oh, so let's talk about this for a second, because notice, I don't know if anyone has, but like the fact that you're saying personal and not personalized, which I've sort
Yes.
of like learned from you guys. So can you talk a little bit about the differences and what that means for you guys?
Yeah, and it's funny. Greg, who's our CEO, is the person that really brought this to light. I don't know if this was probably well over a year ago now. Him and I were actually having this exact conversation, and I was like, I don't understand the difference between personalized and personal.
Mm,
And then the difference that he outlined was personalize is more like a one-to-many approach. You're just trying to
mm,
personalize things in automation.
mm,
Personal is more about creating that one-to-one relationship with a person. Like there are ways to scale that. It's much harder though. Like it's not
mm,
just putting a dynamic field, for example, into a email, and saying your first name's in there, and now that's a personalized email. Personal is all about like that bond and that relationship and that connection you're making with the person on the other end of the line, or the person that's in front of you. And that's really the difference between the two words. um,
mm,
and that's where like even in our CS, like we've had to tone down our personalization or personalizing and try to
mm,
make it more personal. So like even in our plans that we're building with our customers, we have a template, but we 100% always have to make it personal to the customer we're working with, because that person on the other end may not understand what the Excel magic that you did to make that sheet have a ton of different colors, and they can't understand it. So
mm,
how can you make it personal so they understand exactly the outputs that you're looking to get at, from a business sense? And then on a more 5 to 9 cents is how can you just have a conversation with that person and connect with
mm,
that person as a human being. We try to bring
mm,
those aspects into every engagement that we do. But
mm.
those are just a couple of two quick examples.
What would be your advice to other teams that are in a similar stage as Alyce, that maybe their mind is spinning right now and they're thinking, wow, this seems like it takes a lot of people. And, how does this, you mentioned scale, how do I really scale this? Is it really important to worry about? Sometimes a lot of us, I feel like we think about scaling just a little bit too soon. Um, but I'm curious to know, like, if, these questions are whirling around, this sounds heavy. It sounds like a lot that has to go into creating these personal bonds. What would you say to them as far as how to approach that, what the benefit is, and sort of how you've moved through that at Alyce?
Yeah, I always like to compare, and I am 100% guilty of doing this over time, is trying to jump to the solution and jump to
Mm,
the automation. And this is something I learned at my last company, is like scale the unscalable first before you think about putting it into a solution. So make sure it's the
mm,
right thing. And then once you really like it's backbreaking, you just can't do it anymore. And then it's time to think about scaling it with
mhm,
automation or with a person, for example, if you just can't scale it anymore. So we take that approach and kind of that core DNA about being scrappy into all of our personal like initiatives and trying to make
mm,
those things scale. So a lot of what we do goes back to like even thinking about, can we, what does it take to be personal, first of all, and
mhm,
why do we need to be personal in this aspect? Then we start figuring out like, what are all those different inputs, what's the plan we need to put in place, what does that experience need to look like, what's our north star vision there, and then
mm,
breaking it up and saying like, they're like, we're not going to hit our north star in our first get-go. We're probably going to take slices of this and implement it in slices. Like you're never going to be able to get the whole thing in a waterfall motion. So this is kind of where you have to think about it from an agile standpoint of like, what are the core things that deliver the most value from a process maturity, which is more your internal processy, and then a
mm,
customer experience. So when you have when you're able to focus on like what is the most delightful experience for our customers, that's generally probably
mm,
something you should prioritize. And then are you able to, does it have a high process maturity? So is it something that you don't have to invest a lot of time in to get a really high output on the customer experience side? That's how we kind of focus on this stuff. And then we actually
mm,
break it out even more, is when we're looking at our full customer journey across all the different tasks that we do. And we do a lot. And we have a lot of manual stuff, and we do have some automated stuff, whether it's just internal automated and it feels more personalized on the external side. But then we look at like, here are our core set of folks that we engage with, or personas really, that we're
mm,
engaging with. So in our typical customer engagement, we're working with sales, marketing, and operations. And a lot of times we only sell to our marketing stakeholders. So how do we not just work with our marketing stakeholders?
mm,
Because we kick off and we start talking with our marketing stakeholders, and then 3 weeks later, we bring in our sales stakeholders, and they're a little bit abrasive because they don't want to see change or anything like that. So how do we create an experience for them? And also our operations friends that typically are the last folks to be thought of
mm,
in any implementation cycle. How do we prep our personas and guide that journey, or orchestrate it really, and make it to be the most personal to whoever we are engaging with? And some of that is a lot of prep time in advance. So
mhm,
let me pick on our operations persona for a second. Is typically they're brought in when you're ready to integrate with Salesforce, just like any solution. Like you're
mhm,
ready to do these integrations, you're super excited as the person that bought this solution. Then you bring the operations person in, and they're like, whoa, 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 wait a second.
yeah,
I have a backlog of 3 months. I can't tackle this thing right now. Like, tell me the urgency. Tell me why this is important. Tell me what's this going to impact so I can kind of start prioritizing that. So we try to break those conversations in early on with our marketing stakeholders, so they're properly equipped to have those internal conversations before we even get on the phone with the operations person. So when we get on the phone with the operations person, they're not putting their guard up. They're actually having a really
mm,
productive conversation with us about what are the steps to get to where they need to be. And I've
mm,
made the mistake in companies before where you just wait until that operations person's on there and then you have a fluid conversation. And that's not a great experience for your operations person. It's same from the sales side. If it's the first time they're seeing
mm,
this tool, are they really going to adopt it
mm,
if you're the
yeah,
first person that's introducing it to them?
right,
So you just need to figure out like where are the appropriate steps in that journey to deliver the
mm.
best experience. And some of it could just be prep for different stakeholders, or content that's created in advance in your plan.
Yeah.
And it is different for every single customer.
Yeah, it is. And sort of, as I'm listening to you walk through some of these stages and process, at the beginning of the call, I talked about your focus on connection and empowerment and thoughtfulness. I internalize this as thoughtfulness. Yes, you're helping the team be proactive. They're thinking a few steps down the road. They're thinking, if I'm going to need an ops person a few months from now, I should probably start having those conversations right now. For me, that feels very thoughtful because you are getting to know that person and involving them much earlier than maybe a lot of teams or products would. And involving their needs and desires and whatever goals a part of the process, so that once you actually start the real work, you have amassed a huge amount of knowledge and already built that connection with them. So I think that's really smart. I mean, again, seeing how it manifests and between Koala and Alyce is, you and I had one or two conversations and you immediately introduced me to Chaz. Like Chaz is going to be helping to facilitate and vet and understand if this is even something that we'd be interested in. You sort of gave it a check mark. Yeah, initially, I like this idea. And then you involved him right away. And then you empowered him and let him sort of go through, or asked him to go through this process. So, um, and it was wonderful to be able to do that alongside him, and he involved Tracy, like every at every moment. It's hard for people listening, like, they know it is so hard to be proactive. Like,
It's the
it's
hardest thing.
it's so hard. So I think for you guys, as you're sort of, again, acting as a mentor and advisor for teams that are in similar stages or maybe even younger, and or earlier, I should say, as they're thinking about how to be proactive, do you have any tidbits or expertise or anything to share around how you go about helping the team to get ahead of some of these problems or opportunities that are going to be coming down the line?
Yeah, definitely. And the good news is it's the same thing, whether you are a customer success manager or a customer success leader. The
Mm,
bad news is it's a lot of work, but
mm,
it's a lot of lift. It's just, honestly, it's just reps and sets. It's about going through those motions, and honestly, it's really about like doing the hard work up front before you get to the solutions that we were talking about earlier. So mapping out like, what are all the steps I need to take to get to my goal, whether it's a work back plan or a start from scratch plan. um, Always start there, because then you're going to figure out like, where do I need to iterate. So from a CS leader mentality, a lot of times what we end up doing is we say like, hey, like, what are all the different things we do or our customer success managers do and engage with different customers, and we start trying to figure out like, where are the gaps. And then a common question that I got asked recently is, why do we have two kickoff calls essentially with one customer?
mm,
And when you're looking at the journey and you're writing out all the different steps, you're like, yeah, you really don't need this. The process where it's broken is actually one step further up, is we're just not getting enough information yet to make sure we're involving the right parties and the proper expectations up front from what happened in the sales cycle. So how can we just improve the knowledge transfer from our account executive over to our CSM? Then we can actually save an hour of our customers' work.
mm,
So writing out like every single step, in my opinion, is really the only way you're going to be able to solve this. And then once you have that all written out, you've done the hard work. And now you just need to figure out like, where are those gaps? And it's the same thing with a customer. So if you're a customer success manager, you know your typical plan, your typical steps and motions that you have to go through as a vendor to get them successful. Now,
mm,
once you have that strategy call or that kickoff call, you're understanding their goals, their objectives, and everything. And it may be a little bit different than customer X over here. And that's where you're going to adjust that plan a little bit accordingly.
mm,
So let's say with Alyce, for example, a lot of our attribution and our metrics actually goes through Salesforce, but not every single customer has Salesforce. So you're probably going to have to adjust if that customer doesn't want to connect to Salesforce or potentially doesn't have it at all. Maybe they have Dynamics, for example.
mm,
And we want to figure out like, well, how are they going to get proper attribution for that company? And
mm,
then you're going to change the plan accordingly, based off of that objective. And that's kind of that work back mentality. It's like, I still need to get to this outcome, but I need to adjust my plan a little bit. and iterate
Mm,
on it. And
smart.
that's kind of how we look at it and that's why I say it's the same as if you're a CS leader or a CSM. It's kind of that same, just reps and sets and motions.
Yeah.
There's really is no silver bullet. I've looked for it, I can tell you. um, have not found it. There's a lot of solutions out there that potentially can tell you they solve for it, but at the end of the day, it's just putting pen to paper.
Mm. I think the other thing that resonates too with me is that in the same way that it's not necessarily different depending on what team that you're on, it's also not different depending if you're early or mid stage or later
Yep.
stage. So I think
Yeah.
that's a golden nugget. It might
100%.
not be a silver bullet, but it's a golden nugget.
Yeah.
um,
100%.
Yeah. So you've been in customer success for it's going to be a decade soon, I think, right? So you have a lot
Yeah.
of knowledge that you've dropped on us over the past, almost hour. Um, I guess to dig into the personal just a bit, can you tell us a little bit about how you landed in customer success and why? I mean, you've been in this field now for a long time. What keeps you here? How did you get started? And then I'd love to later ask some advice for newbies that are looking to enter the field.
Yeah. I definitely gradually found my way into it.
Mm,
I've kind of had the fortunate opportunity to almost in every single one of my roles have some form of customer success without necessarily realizing it or not. So I originally started my career, I was in product management and sales engineer in a financial services company
mm,
years ago, learned a ton about the industry, building products for those unique stakeholders. Then realized quickly I wasn't working close enough as customers I wanted to be. Um,
mm,
so I made that change and I would say defined a trajectory of my career. And that's where I actually jumped into a sales role, a field sales role for Oracle and progressed into another one at Intuit. And that's really where I started getting into this, what we would call more customer success focus, which was account management.
mm.
And you could call that early customer success, but then it
Totally.
was really focused on like my role is more focused on like driving purchasing of more licenses and growing your book of business at all costs. And for me, I honestly was very much not duck in there. I didn't really care too much about the numbers or anything. I would miss all my like KPIs and my sales metrics. Somehow I would manage to get to CEO club year after year.
Mm.
Perplexed my VP of sales every single time, um, which honestly was really due to something I didn't realize in the moment. But my focus was really on value realization and avoiding
Mm,
churn was kind of like my foundation versus just chasing the expansion in the sales.
mm,
Even though I was still in the sales org and really quoted to that. Um, but I never had the most bookings and probably had the smallest sales, I would say, but it would consistently grow my territory because of the retention rates. And that's really when I had that like aha moment and started making the transition into customer success. And that's
mm,
when I started building out the first CS team at a company called QuickBase,
mhm,
which it was right when we departed into it, we decided like, oh, Sean, like how he is handling his book of business is a little bit different than how some of our other account managers are handling their book of businesses. And one
mm,
of the big things we were looking at as a business is like, oh wow, we're growing like this in terms of licenses, but our adoption is like this, and it's just going to get worse.
mm,
That's probably not good. Probably
mhm,
not healthy from a financial standpoint over the long haul. So from there, we had like an amazing team that was tasked with this over the course of I think it was like 2 months, and figure out how do we create these teams that focus on value realization, adoption. We really haven't invested anything in it in 10, 15 years of being a company. And really fun example, you have 6,000 customers, could be really small like florist companies, or it could be the Fortune 1 company. That's
mm.
going to be really fun trying to build that customer success organization. Um, and honestly, like a lot of my learnings are from there. So I learned so much about how to create stuff from the ground up, no matter the challenge. Though my specialty has always been what I would call kind of that high touch realm.
Mm,
Um, so then kind of evolved over time into a bunch of different interesting opportunities. I actually took what isn't necessarily a step back in my career, but I took a step into a smaller company.
mm,
to learn a little bit more about how small companies grew.
Mm,
And that was a company called Drift. And they were, back in 2017, they were really going towards growth mode, I would say.
mhm,
So when I joined that company, I was put into a role where I could learn every single minute of every single day in a different way than I learned in my last company of scaling that organization. And that was an absolute amazing experience for me to grow as a leader in that
mm,
time. And as you can imagine, I learned really how to grow and scale teams and processes incredibly fast. And one of my like biggest takeaways is no secret. It's just learn and iterate. Learn,
mhm,
iterate. Don't be afraid. Just keep going. And then that's
mhm,
kind of brought me to my opportunity over at Alyce, and that's been my journey in customer success. It's been all over the place. I've had a lot of fortunate opportunities to help co-build a lot of organizations over time, though, from the ground up, whether it's with
mm.
a large company with thousands of customers to a company that literally is starting from $1 of revenue.
Mm, mm. Do you think there are similar problems or opportunities no matter the stage? Are you noticing similarities and threads that, you can apply no matter if, it's thousands and thousands of customers or it's a handful that you're now using?
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think at different stages, it's more about the resources around you than
Mm,
anything else cross-functionally. So the challenges that we had when we were scaling out at QuickBase were much different than the challenges we have at Alyce. For example, QuickBase was a company for 15 years. We had a lot of data about our customers, and we had a lot of hypotheses about our customers that were data-backed.
mm,
So we were able to make more educated decisions that way. The challenge more at Alyce is we don't have that. We're in a new market. We're creating a new market too. So it's more about how do we get as close to our customers as possible from a qualitative sense, and how do we
mm,
adjust and iterate as fast as we can qualitatively from the learnings that we are getting from our customers. Because the data that we see, and we've tried health scoring at Alyce before, it is very
mm,
misleading
mm,
because the health scoring, to be clear, it was all product data, and
mhm,
we didn't really bake in anything else, so it was laggard. And then when you see a customer doing really well, and then you talk to them, they're like, yeah, we're not doing great. You're just like,
mm.
well, what do you mean? Your health score is 100.
Right, right, right. What could be
So we've
wrong?
had yeah, so it is definitely two different flavors. And then I do think it's mostly about the resources around you. In a small
Mm,
startup, you just don't have the resources around you because your product team is building product. They're not necessarily really digging too much into data just yet.
mm,
So that was an interesting challenge for us. And then same thing with your on the sales side and the marketing side is you're still trying to nail down your pitch. What's going to land with your customers? How are you going to attract new customers into the funnel? You're trying new things. So you're getting kind of a wide array of customers versus a very like narrow focused set of customers. So
mm,
rather than focusing on just making this a super repeatable and delightable moment in a newer company, you're just trying to see if this is going to work with this segment, with this customer. Like you may have a customer that looks nothing like the other customer um, in back-to-back meetings, and that is something you kind of have to figure out, like what is the right motion for each of those and which one
mm.
should we be focusing on and scaling out. So a little bit different challenges,
Yeah.
definitely. And I would say the resources that you have as a company definitely play a huge part in that.
Yeah, no, that was really well put, and sort of crisply worded because I would agree with you on that. Again, at Alyce, you talked a lot about this importance for being personal and how to staff around being personal and what that means from a prepping perspective, what it means for your, life cycle stages. And I think none of that would be possible without a leadership team that supported it. No one can work within a vacuum and say, this is my goal for customer success if it's not supported by the overall company. Because there are a lot of ramifications of following that as a playbook. We hear often people that are really excited by the customer success field. Over the past year-ish, we've noticed an increase in the number of chief customer officers that are at companies, which makes people very excited to have sort of a pathway to the C-suite for those that are very interested in that trajectory. And we've also noticed this focus on the the how do I say, uh, sort of that role, the CS role, as being a champion role within the organization, and not necessarily one that's hid. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry if you heard some snoring. That's my pup. She's
Sure, mine
enjoying her
is
little
snoring on
nap.
the couch right now.
Yeah, totally. So knowing that there's a plethora of opportunities, and yes, understand we've had a fair amount of companies that have downsized across the board. There's still a lot of people interested in customer success, interested in entering the field. What advice would you give the person that's just starting to realize, I think I would love a CS role? What advice would you give to them as they look for companies, as they start interviewing, so that they can understand if they would maybe be a good fit or not for a role like CS?
Yeah, it's always interesting. One of the big things I always say to a lot of companies that are starting out CS, or even someone that's brand new to looking at CS, um, an interesting question I always say is, how do you like consulting and how do you like sales?
Mm,
Because to a degree, that is what customer success is.
yeah.
Um, it may not necessarily, just like we don't have a commercial transaction to us, but you're really helping consult and sell your company with your customer as well.
Mm,
And it's a lot of hard work that goes involved with that. It's not always this operator playbook per se. So it's very different than like reactive customer support, where customer support, you have everything outlined for you, and you're basically saying, if this happens, I do this. With customer success is a little bit different. You are creating your own journey with each one of your customers. So that's one thing I always say, think about, because not everyone is always willing to do that, and they're not always willing to kind of step up and figure out like what's that hard work to get there, because there is no silver bullet really, even as a customer success
mm,
manager that works. You may have a great playbook at your company, but it always needs to be improved and iterated on, and that's something you as a customer success manager are really going to have to leverage and lean into. You're going to find those gaps and you're going to fix those gaps. So someone that is honestly like my biggest thing is creative, and someone that is looking to do more of a consultative role.
mm,
That is really the folks that fit well in customer success. Um, Also find, like, I'll give a direct comparison,
mhm,
kind of the role and background that I see fit best with customer success managers. If you've ever been a teacher and you have built curriculum from scratch for a actual like start to finish year or session, or anything, like that is actually very close in comparison to what you'll be doing as a customer success
mm,
manager. Not directly, definitely. You aren't
mhm.
working with fourth graders, for example. Um, but that is what you are doing as a customer success manager, is you are building that curriculum for that customer that is tailored to their learning needs. And that's kind of the background I've always looked for, and kind of the experience too, from like
That's awesome.
a for example perspective.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. You're right. Customer success is a blend of a lot of different things. And it also depends on the company that you work with. And they're going to have different focuses as well. Some customer success, success managers are responsible for securing the renewal. Some of them are not. So I think too, as you're interviewing and looking at potential roles, ask what are the key success metrics that you sort of gauge the success manager against, because that will help tell you a lot of, okay, one foot on land and one is on sea. Is that between support and services? Is that between sales and support? Like, what is the dynamic of this team that I'm, potentially vetting or looking to join? Yeah,
My
and that's
favorite,
good. Mhm.
yeah, I was gonna say my favorite question that I tell anyone who's looking for to dive into CSM to ask your interviewer is, walk me through an end-to-end life cycle of a customer at your company and who owns what. So who owns new logo sales, who owns value realization, who owns adoption, who owns expansion, who owns renewals. And then you can go a layer deeper. It says when a support case comes in, who actually is the one that's responding to that, and what's that experience look like? That way you get like a really granular view of how that company views customer success, because you're right. Everyone labels customer success a little bit differently, and we at Alyce do too. Um, we've I've labeled it very differently and had different roles and responsibilities at every organization I've been a part of. And it's
Yeah.
definitely something to dig into when you are interviewing.
Yeah, that's part of the fun. I mean, you can have so many different careers within CS.
Yep.
Depending on the organizations that you're working with, what the teams look like, and also, how you ebb and flow throughout the org. Some people step into product management, some people step into CS operations. There are a lot of different pathways, which I think makes it so fun. So for those that want to find you, that have really enjoyed this conversation, how do they find you? On Twitter or LinkedIn? What's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, I do have the Twitter and I do have the LinkedIn. Um, Easier to find me on LinkedIn. I do respond to pretty much everyone that will LinkedIn message me. I may be behind. I do get a lot of messages, just as a heads up. But also follow me on Twitter. I do a little bit more business on Twitter than I do personal. If you want to actually see like what's going on in Sean's personal life, I am an avid runner and cyclist, so follow me on Strava. Um, huge fan of Strava and what they're doing,
Mm.
but also Instagram if you want to see kind of a more picturesque, beautiful view of where I'm traveling. Right now, it's a very boring Instagram. I don't think I've updated it in 6 months since my last travel, but I do try to travel quite a bit, and I document a lot of that on the Instagram.
That's awesome. I'll include links then below and in the show notes. And then I'll also ask you separately for maybe some of the top resources you like to go to as you're just,
Yes.
thinking about how you're growing the team, and that would be great. So we'll include those. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. This
Yeah,
was
definitely.
amazing. I
It's
enjoyed
been
the
awesome.
conversation. Yeah, it's been fantastic. We hit on
Yeah.
so many different points, and I feel like we could probably talk for another hour or two. So I'll wrap it up out of respect.
Yeah. Yeah, if you do have questions, I can talk about CS all day. So
Yeah,
if you find me, I will talk your ear off about it.
that's awesome. Thank you so much. Cool.